Good morning, everybody. Of course, TikTok Live is being rude again for some odd reason here. Give me just a second here to fix this because why is it being... I I absolutely hate TikTok Live. It is the biggest... All right, folks, give me just a second. And this is... Let's see if it'll come back. There it is. There it is. It's finally working. So I apologize for that. Because TikTok was once again being a pain in the tuchus. So give me just a second. Get it restarted. It always happens right before I go live here. It never fails. So give me just a second and we'll get this going properly here. If it'll let me. What the heck is this thing? I hate TikTok Live so much. All right, there we go. Good morning and happy Thursday. For those of you that are new, welcome. And for those of you returning, welcome back to the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, episode number 14, Antitrust. My name is Bill, and on today's show, we're talking about continued major gaming layoffs, the end of the JetBlue acquisition of Spirit Airlines, and Tesla Cybertruck specs. Then we're going to learn some industry terms with jargon in a jiffy, help you build a pathway to success with Career Corner, live listener Q&A, and our discussion this week, antitrust laws. My co-host is fellow co-founder of the Three Greens Simulations Group, retired NYC EMT, and flight sim extraordinaire Tommy D of Level Flight Simulations. How you doing this morning, Tommy?
Doing well, Bill. Doing well. Thanks. How about yourself?
I was just about ready to throw my head through this computer.
Oddly,
TikTok Live. So I went live on TikTok Live, right? I was doing that whole intro thing. And when I go to start, instead of capturing the Restream Studio, it has my podcast notes up on TikTok Live. Oh, so that took a second.
Because
That's gonna
as
get
you were
edited out.
going off about it, I was also having an issue getting TikTok Live through Studio
Oh,
going.
really?
Yeah, yeah. It was,
I don't understand. Like, such a pain in the TikTok Live. Every time they do an update, every time we do this podcast, every single time there's something new that just messes up the stream. So, anyways, I digress. But overall, I'm doing okay. Last week we talked about a major update with the house buying. As you could tell behind me, my beautiful custom posters are gone. I just have my lights up, and it looks very bare, but I swear there's boxes behind me. You can see them, moving boxes. So it's progressing along very quickly. Just telling Tommy after this, I got to go run an adult a little bit too. So that's going to be interesting, involving the house, some more moving stuff. But Tommy, you've been getting some winter weather, haven't you, this week?
we have. We got a couple inches of snow the other day. We're forecast to get another couple starting sometime tonight after midnight. And then in the middle of all that, I get to go buy a car battery.
Well, and the thing is you're getting the weather that we had. So we had sub-zero temperatures where I lived, and then now all that weather system's pushing east towards Tommy. So unfortunately, Tommy's getting the brunt of the weather that we got, and my car too. When I got back from my trip in the airport parking lot, that's the first thing I always go do, because my very first winter where I live, my car did die. I had to have my wife come and jump me. The car, not me. But like, I ran out there and I turned on the car, and man, it struggled. I thought I turned it over and it did the vroom, vroom, vroom. It's like, come on. And it kicked over, luckily. So got to be careful. Even new car batteries in cold weather, cold just absolutely drains the battery. So once again, Tom and I are going to be adulting after we get off the talk show here today.
That's just totally horrible. I was hoping to act like a kid for a little while today. Don't think it's going to happen.
I would say all the kids out there, they're like, I can't wait to be an adult. Just enjoy it as much as you can. My parents, like growing up, for example, my parents always told me, the reason they didn't let me work a job when I was like, I wanted to work as a kid, but they wouldn't let me, is they wanted me to enjoy my time. I didn't need to, but they wanted me to enjoy my time as a child. And I was like, that's stupid. Like, I want to work. And then now I understand why, because now it's just like, I wish I could go back to that time period where I didn't have the responsibilities that I do now. But anyways, I digress. But up first, we're going to have Tommy start off with some gaming news, and then I'll do some aviation news, and then Tommy's taking over automotive news this week. So without further ado, take it away, Tommy D.
Thanks, Bill. So this week in major gaming news, we're still looking at some of the economic downturn in the gaming industry. So I was the article I was perusing actually comes from IGN, the International Gaming Network. So there we discussed last week the layoffs that were affecting Twitch. Well, apparently this layoff abyss goes a lot deeper than just uh, Twitch. Lords of the Fallen and Singer Ghost publishers, CI Games, they laid off 10% of their workforce. GI Biz, CI, and this is all CI Games. CI Games itself is claiming massive losses in all 4 quarters of 2023, and that resulted in 10% of their layoffs, um, which was basically about 222 employees. Colossal companies like Embracer, and I'm actually reading the article. Embracer, Borderlands developer, Gearbox Software, and Tomb Raider developer Crystal Dynamics, as well as the Fortnite publisher Epic Games and Hasbro. Embracer laid off 5%, Epic laid off 16 or 830 people, and Hasbro cut 20%, meaning 1,100 employees were just cut from their workforce, which to me, I'm trying to figure out the rationale behind that, because are they releasing games that aren't so popular and they're not getting any return on their investment? Um, is the economy in the gaming industry starting to take a downward turn to where people are not buying the brand new games, or are they not just interested in the gaming content that these developers are putting out? So there's a lot of stuff there, and I'm going to go ahead and I bookmarked it in my computer, so I'm definitely going to go and watch this. One of the other updates, real quickly. Last week we spoke about PMDG's 777 and how they kind of fishpole announced a 767. There was another developer that we were watching, the Bluebird, for that 757, 200, and 300 that had been just put off and put off, put off. Now there's being optimistic to release for a 2024 release date for those. Well, oddly enough, as I was perusing my multiple updates for the Microsoft Flight Simulator world through the Just Flight website, oddly enough, Bluebird Simulations now turns around and says that they're in the early stages of development of a 767, sorry. And I believe it's a 200. And oddly enough, no other details about that. But I'm starting to see trending here. It seems that there is quite a bit of mimicking between other third-party software developers for aircraft for the sim and PMDG. So I'm starting to wonder if we're going to start seeing a little bit in an elevation of competition, and I wonder if and when that's going to start driving the prices down on some of these licenses for some of these uh, study level aircraft that we all prefer to use rather than the base models that come. Because I know since I had 2020, I've never used any of their base model. I used the 182, the Cessna 182 once, and then I just shut the sim down and walked away and went and did something else. I wasn't really a fan. But Bill, that is all we got as far as gaming news this week.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so once again, we talked about it last week. We're not saying that we called it, but Bluebird's coming out with a 7.6 to compete with the PMDG 777. And also, was it PMDG that also was mentioning that they might have, was it a 7.6 as well that they were trying to develop?
Extreme early stages of a 7.6.
Okay, so yeah, obviously putting out there to compete, because PMDG, in my opinion, is the front runner. It's the industry standard for study level aircraft. So thanks for that, Tommy. And now I will take over some aviation news. To start off, as per the usual, this week in aviation history. It's the January 14th, 1935, United Airlines equips its fleet with a de-icing system for airplane wings following successful tests on a Boeing 247, which, if I remember correctly, a Boeing 247 is the Stratocruiser. This is significant because, as you know now, all airliners have to be certified to fly through icing conditions, which includes a de-icing and anti-ice system. Now, de-icing is different than anti-icing. Anti-icing is preventative. De-icing is getting rid of. So, for example, our systems on our current modern airplanes can be both. We can preheat the wings and engines before going into icing for certain airplanes, and that technically is anti-ice. But realistically, once we're airborne, everything is de-icing. It's removing ice from the wings. So this is hugely significant. As I've said before, I've talked about it in ACE podcast as well, my previous history podcast. ACE, that United Airlines has always been a front runner in the development of equipment and technology as well. So once again, United Airlines, and actually in I believe it was 1937, so in 2 years from this, we'll talk about it maybe a little bit further down the road, they did a Skylab where they were testing pressurizing aircraft. So United Airlines always helping out with the further advancement of the aviation and airline industry. Now, onto some more modern news. We're going to talk about the JetBlue Spirit merger, because it's been kind of put into the back of our head for a couple months. Back at, I believe, the beginning of the year, beginning of last year, there was some drama with the low-cost carriers and the hybrid JetBlue here in the United States. So basically, Frontier and Spirit, they were kind of canoodling. They were talking to one another, saying, "Hey, you know, I want to acquire you, right? Because then we become the fifth largest airline, or we put pressure on their competition by combining, right?" JetBlue got word of this and said, "No. We want Spirit, right? We want to take over Spirit because, one, Airbus fleet, everybody's on Airbus, so they get more airplanes, not to mention the route structure. JetBlue is very established in the East and overseas. Spirit is basically all over the place. So not only would they get more infrastructure, more networking, but they would have access to a larger pilot group. And like I said, I believe the article was saying that it was going to be at least the fifth largest airline, which would then put pressure. They can compete with the big four, which is United, American, Delta, and Southwest. Which, I mean, for my company, that would help us a little bit because, you know, for us, Southwest is putting a pressure on our company, I think, in like Denver and some of our other hubs. So it'd be nice to have Southwest try to fight on two fronts. But unfortunately, a United States federal judge has ruled that the JetBlue Spirit Airlines merger is no longer a thing, handing a significant victory to the Department of Justice, which has filed a lawsuit against the merger. I thought that was very interesting. I have no what skin there is in the game with the Department of Justice. Usually it's like other airlines protesting, businesses, and other travel industry operators that have objections to this ultimately. But when the Department of Justice stepped in, that was really confusing. Still don't know exactly why they stepped in to stop this. But in its defense, JetBlue argued that a merger would not be anti-competitive or antitrust, which the DOJ tried to prove. JetBlue used 2 points to back up the defense. First, the fact that Spirit Airlines faces major financial struggles, which is true. The argument was that the passengers would be saved from a failing airline. Point number 2 was that by combining forces, they would pose stronger competition against the Big Four, like I mentioned, American Airlines, Delta Airlines, United Airlines, and Southwest Airlines. The Big Four already controlled more than 80% of the American market, and neither Spirit nor JetBlue could challenge them on their own. And if I didn't mention this before, this is from Simple Flying. This is an article that I am reading from Simple Flying. So JetBlue is basically arguing that in order to be able to compete with the Big Four, which already control 80% of the market. Now, mind you, these airlines have acquired, absorbed, taken over put other airlines out of business. They've been around forever. United Airlines has been around since 1927. It started with the Boeing company in the Pacific Northwest and the conglomerate way back when. They were making airplanes and running mail. Then the government said, hey, you can't do that. So then they split off into the Boeing Air Group, which was Boeing separated from United Airlines, which continued to run mail and passengers. American Airlines has absorbed, as far as I can remember, TWA, America West, Delta's absorbed. Delta has Northwest, and the most recent one for United Airlines was Continental. So the reason that they're there is because they did the same thing. They merged. Now, understand they went through the same process that Spirit and JetBlue, where they had to go through a process of getting approved by the government for anti-competitive or antitrust, right? To basically prevent monopolization of the airline industry. United Airlines, for example, they had to right size during theirs, so they had to adjust their fleet and staffing in order to be able to be small enough to be considered for the merger. So it's no matter what anybody says, mergers are not fun for anybody. There's a lot of uncomfortable things that happen during a merger, like downsizing and renegotiating of new contracts, stuff like that. So mergers aren't good, but sometimes they do help the companies that are merging. And for example, Spirit, it has been in the news, financially is struggling too. So they do need somebody to help them out. But for right now, the DOJ, Department of Justice, and the federal judge says, nope, it's not legal. They're worried about the increase of prices by becoming a bigger airline like that would cause that airline to maybe raise the price point of their tickets, denying affordable access to air travel to that demographic, I think is what the judge was saying. So it's going to be interesting. They denied it. And Judge Young is the federal judge that did this. Didn't say that it was done. It's just that they could come back and try again later. But he's saying right now it's not working. So interesting things. And that is our discussion topic for today, which we'll get to a little bit later on. Talking about antitrust laws, something that goes as far back as the early 1900s and 1904 from Teddy Roosevelt, the man, the myth, the legend. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that is all I have right now for aviation news. What do you think about that, Tommy? I thought the JetBlue merger was going to be just a slam dunk. I thought it was a no-brainer.
When I first heard about it, I thought it was going to be a no-brainer. I really, really thought it was just going to be smooth, done.
Mm-hmm.
All parties were going to agree. Spirit. And if I remember reading the article correctly, they were going to leave it as Spirit Airlines. They
weren't.
No plans of. No, they weren't. They were going to convert everything to JetBlue.
Yeah, because of branding. So, and I'm going to do this delicately, okay? Because this is not. But when you think of Spirit, you don't have to say it out loud. And this is for everybody who's listening. When you think of Spirit Airlines, is it a? You can. I'm going to simply. Is it a positive thought? Or is it like a positive image, or do you think negative? Yeah, I mean, let me just put it this way. When I was with Envoy, we shared a terminal. Across the way was a gate there, for Spirit, and I witnessed 10, not 10. I would say in a month, I probably witnessed 3 or 4 full out brawls, like physical fistfights over stuff like. And largely what it is people, when they buy the tickets, they don't realize that it is a bare fare, which is what it says on the engines for Spirit. But what it is, it's your seat. That's all you get. But like if you want any additional things like internet, you want to check a bag, you got to pay for it. That's how low cost carriers work. And I think that's where the frustration broke out, because people were trying to do stuff and they're like, well, you got to pay for it. And they're just like, wait, I thought it was included in the ticket. But yeah, so the reputation for Spirit, is not good. So that's where it was going to benefit, because JetBlue was going to not only double its size, but the branding would also help that as well. Because JetBlue, when you think JetBlue, it's more of a positive. I think Mint class, first class, Airbus is going overseas when I think JetBlue. You know what I mean? It's a different. Yeah. It's different. Back in the day, JetBlue, the only thing I could think of with JetBlue is that Airbus. Back in the day is when that Airbus landed in LA with the nose wheel sideways on the news.
I remember
That's
that.
all I could remember. And because JetBlue had a rocky start. JetBlue was having issues with staffing, with booking, with cancellations, with maintenance. But they've grown since then. That was back in mid early 2000s, I guess, right?
Yeah, because I was actually still working in South Queens when Terminal 1 at Kennedy was being constructed, which was all JetBlue capital.
There you go. So, we see where they're grown. And I do agree with JetBlue. If they want to make a run at the big four, right? Because we call them legacy majors, right? Or legacy airlines, which is Delta, United, and American. And Southwest isn't really a legacy because of how do I put this not lightly, but it is a legacy in a way. It's the longest lasting low cost carrier. Let's just put it that way. The other threes are legacies because they got their start before, like an airmail. American, United, and Delta
Oh yeah,
got started way back when. And Delta is actually the youngest of the three, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say it was probably United first. I want to say in 1927 with was it Parney? I should know this. I'm gonna get reamed for not knowing this, but it was the Pacific Boeing or Aircraft Company or PAC that started in 1927, and then I want to say it was American next, then Delta, but
hmm
they've been around since the early onset of airlines before deregulations in the 1950s. Delta or Southwest started off as Braniff Airlines, but that was later on. I
I
would probably say
remember
what
Braniff.
Braniff was like 50s, 60s, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I believe Braniff lasted until the later
Mm-hmm.
60s, and then I mean, because I was born in 71, and I've my entire childhood I had family that worked at Kennedy and LaGuardia,
Mm-hmm.
rampers, cargo agents, and all that. And I remember them specifically talking about Braniff and uh,
And Braniff must have been post deregulation then, because
mhm.
Braniff's model wouldn't have existed. So that's probably early 1960s. So a very young airline that is now known as Southwest, because I still remember the 727s painted in the peanut. I call it the peanut bag, but the peanut brown color scheme.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not real. I don't really consider it a legacy because it's not one of the original three, but it is considered one of the big four because of its financial resilience and its time in the industry. So I do agree with it in terms of strategy with JetBlue being able to buy up a struggling airline with literally the exact same fleet, a better route structure, more pilots. Um, and being able to compete with the big four. Because ultimately, if you're not trying to be one of the big four, right, or big three, or whatever you want to call it, then what are you doing as an airline? You know what I mean? That's the whole point. You're trying to be at the top.
You become
But
stagnant.
you become stagnant. But here's another thing, because this is some rumors I've been hearing from pilots that I know that are not at Jet, like talking to pilots from JetBlue and Spirit while I'm around the airport. JetBlue was talking about filing bankruptcy in the merger. This has happened
Interesting.
many times before because it allows them to restructure freely, especially with union contracts and stuff, because they're in bankruptcy. It allows them to kind of break the chains of any contractual stuff financially too, to be able to reform their organization the way they want to. But
So use bankruptcy to basically blank slate it.
correct, yep. Their airlines have done that in the past. I can't remember if United did it, but airlines have done it in the past. I know Republic did it. Republic did it in the
Mhm.
middle of where they were economically sound in a way, but they did it so that they filed bankruptcy so that they could reform the company and structure it the way they wanted to. But it's not good for pilots. That's only a management thing. It's really good for the company, but usually it's a really bad deal. So I bet there are some pilots out there that work for JetBlue that are just going, or even Spirit. You know what I mean? Because it's both ways. People I've talked to are kind of on the fence about this merger. But the question is are they going to come back? That's my big thing. It's like, okay, so there might be bullet points why Judge Young, the federal judge who blocked it, said, hey, this is the reason why. And maybe they can come back. I don't know. There wasn't like a timestamp, like come back in 30 days, but who knows? It could still be a possibility. Or the only thing that it blocks is JetBlue Spirit. So maybe JetBlue now goes after Frontier. Because if you think about it, if JetBlue and Spirit Airlines combined, Frontier was going to be gone, bought up somewhere, because
Yeah, yeah, they're
there's
going to be
no way they can
rebranded.
compete. Yeah, there's no way they're going to be able to compete.
Well, the
So
infrastructure is there too. Same fleet.
same
Yeah, they,
fleet.
they do have some Boeings,
Yep.
but they do have A320s. Um, they have some
Does Frontier
Embraers, don't they?
Frontier Frontier doesn't fly a Boeing anymore. It's all Airbus.
Is it? Did they finally convert to all Airbus? It.
They're all Airbus. Yeah, they don't fly 737s anymore over at Frontier.
Hmm.
I want to say, didn't they give them to Alaska? I can't remember. We're going on
I don't know.
a
You know what?
rabbit
Sometimes you
hole
can't
here.
tell the players without the scorecard. You know.
Correct. Yeah. I don't have it in front of me, but right now I know that Frontier is all Airbus. So, and even Allegiant. Well, no, Allegiant is getting 737 Maxes,
And they do have a fair share
737-700
of
Max sevens.
320s. Now,
They
last time
do.
I actually flew a Legion, I was on the Super MD-80.
Yeah, they've changed their fleet quite a bit. They might be all
Mhm.
Airbuses right now because they used to fly 75s too. So, but we'll see. It's all moving parts, especially coming out into a very economy rich airline industry post pandemic. So we will
Hmm.
see how that goes. Once again, developing as it goes. Speaking of developing, no further updates on the Max Nines. The only thing that I've heard is that they have found that all 12 bolts that were designed to hold that plug door in failed. Not one, 12. So now I think the NTSB is looking into, was it a quality issue or was it a something with the design of the airplane that failed? So we're still right as of right now. Max Nines at United and Alaska remain grounded. In fact, I was in Austin this week and I saw a couple United and Alaska Airlines 73 Max Nines grounded. Also in Seattle, I was in Seattle as well and saw that as well. So the Max Nine thing is ongoing. I'm getting updates from my company, but as of right now, it's just they're still inspecting, trying to figure out because once they inspect and find the problematic airplanes, they got to figure out what's causing the issue. If it's the bolts that needs to be replaced, if it's like the tooling, or if they need to change the amount of torque pressure or whatever, and then they got to go back and then comply with the airworthiness directive, kind of like our the United 777s when it threw a blade to Pratt and Whitney's.
Hmm.
This was back in 2016. No, it was recent. 2015, 2000, maybe it was 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. It was going from Denver to Honolulu and it threw a blade and the engine just basically imploded, uncontained engine failure. And there was an issue with the Pratt and Whitney. So those airplanes were grounded for a while they were fixing them.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it's not the same thing, but the Max 9, it looks like they're identifying which airplanes are faulty. Then they need to figure out how to fix it and then be able to prove that they've to the FAA that they've all complied with it. So they won't be airborne until then.
Well,
So
now, I mean, will the FAA necessarily send an inspector out? Like, say an
well,
airline has five
not
of
an
them sitting in a
inspector.
hangar.
It won't be an FAA inspector. They'll send out guidance as to how to fix it from that is a basically combined document from the FAA and Boeing, and probably some at this point probably some third party person who's making sure it's being done right. But it won't be an FAA inspector necessarily. It's just they have to be able to prove that they've complied with it via logs and stuff like that, and then they'll
Okay,
send it.
I
So,
gotcha.
all right. Well, that is the update for aviation news. Tommy will be taking over some automotive news with the Cybertruck specifications.
Yeah, I found this article actually pretty interesting. Everybody's been talking about lately, oh, the Tesla Cybertruck, and it's going to be the bee's knees and everything of electric trucks. So, unfortunately, I didn't get Bill a picture of it. Maybe somehow we could put the article up, but this is coming from Motor Trend, which is I kind of enjoy just perusing Motor Trend to see what's going on. So it kind of looks like a F-117 in its design, but they did release some specs on it, which I found pretty interesting. The one thing that I was really looking for was range. So they're finally starting to release everything of the single motor setup. The all-wheel drive is gonna MSRP for about 80 grand, and the rear wheel drive is gonna be just about 61,000 out the door. It reports Halo all-wheel Cyber Beast weighs almost 7,000 pounds, which is that's a pretty hefty vehicle, especially if you can drive it in the Northeast, because 7,000 pounds on ice, that's a significant weight. The all-wheel drive model also comes in at 6,600. So I'm not sure where they are as far as lessening the overall weight of the vehicle, but it's definitely got to do with the motors and whatever Tesla's version of a transfer case is for that front wheels, I should say. So, and this is actually released by Tesla themselves. The 223.7-inch long, 95-inch wide Cyber Beast, I'm sorry, can accelerate from 0 to 60 in 2.6. So that's a pretty good pop. And not counting on the rollout, figure about 3 seconds, you're up at 60 miles an hour. Sorry, the way the article is that I was pulling everything, it's set up weird. Has a max payload of 2,500 pounds, which that's pretty significant, and it has 11,000 pounds of towing power. The two-wheel drive model, you only got about 7,500 pounds of towing power and about 3,500 pounds of payload. So that is drastic as far as trucks are concerned. And 320 up to 440 miles for the Cyber Beast is what they're calling it. And that's the all bells and whistles, four-wheel, all-wheel drive, all of that stuff. And the sorry, computer. So on just the rear wheel drive one, you're looking 340 miles maxing out on the single charge, and it comes with all the typical Tesla toys in it. You know, you put your route in, it shows you all their charging stations, like everything that the Teslas have now, plus the improvement on technology and what's going on with these vehicles. Um, it's not too terrible. They've at least finally starting to get specs, but I still think there's a little bit of a long haul, and that's just solely my opinion because I still believe they have a lot of testing that needs to be done with this. And also, they're not releasing things that I want to know, like what is the actual gear ratio. That's great that they have 20-inch wheels or 17-inch wheels wrapped in rubber and this, that, and the other thing. The armor glass, shatter resistant side, which is pretty cool, thinking from a safety standpoint. But some of the things that I want to know is what battery are they using, what is the electric motor setup, and what is your gear ratio for 4x4? Is it lock nut? Is it on the fly, as some of us know it? Like, what else is there? Give us a little bit more nitty gritty, but I just don't think Tesla's ready to share that. So, what do you think about that one, Bill?
You gotta stop dropping it on me while I'm in the middle of just setting up the other seat. I wasn't ready for it. Well, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Tesla. Never have been. I think they're. I when they first came out, I was super impressed because Elon made it a point to be where it was affordable, where they offered the tech to everybody to begin moving towards, and what I thought was a wholly genuine movement towards green energy and stuff. But then, but then he turned it around. Now it's everything is expensive because Tesla. So I don't know. And the Cybertruck's ugly. I hate to break it to you. I like future modern stuff. I don't like the looks of the Tesla truck personally. So I don't know. And the 340 miles is kind of mediocre. That's the standard long range battery, if you will, of most electric cars now. Like the new Chevy electronic or Trailblazer or maybe Equinox EV that's coming out is boasting a 300-mile range. So, but one thing I will argue though is Tesla has a better charging infrastructure because they got ahead of it. So if you're out on the road in your EV, you'll probably end up using a Tesla charger to charge your car and pay the associated fee associated with it. So I will give Tesla that. They do have better infrastructure, but I've always had a thing about, oh, this is the cool tech, like the Ford F-150 Lightning. Oh, this is cool tech. This is cool tech. But guess what? The average American or person, let's be honest, person in the world cannot afford $100,000 electric car because honestly, the cost savings are not there. The F-150 Lightning, for example, base is like 90 grand. Well, no, base is like 50. I take that back. Base is like 50. Mid trim and upper trim is like 90. But here's the thing. The F1, because I did look at the F-150 Lightning, they are not manufacturing the F-150 Lightning, the base, I should say. You go online and you look, and the only thing they have available for delivery is the mid-level trim, which is like 60 to 70,000. By the time you do all the add-ons and fees and stuff, it's closer to $90,000, which is expensive for a early on EV truck. And what I don't like is there's nothing in lot to be able to test drive. You have to order it. There's which we talked about this before. I'm not buying a car I've never driven before.
Nope, absolutely
You know
not.
what I mean? And for me, that's like, eventually I'm going to get a truck. We've talked about this. It's going to be a gas-driven or gas-powered truck. I love EVs, but I'm not dropping 100 grand on an EV. There's no way.
No, not even close.
No, I need the truck more for the utility than the EV portion of it. I'm not just getting a truck to have a Ford F-150 Lightning. I'm probably going to Ford F-150. So it is a little higher price, but anything over $50,000 for a car is ridiculous, especially because you, generally speaking, the way Americans work is you plan on buying another one at the end of your loan. Like you're like, paid off, time to time to go get a new car,
The
right? Because
American way.
I do. Well, it's not only the American way; it's the cars is one of the worst investments there is because it. I remember reading a figure; it's 25% off the lot. It depreciates. It's not
Hmm.
like when you buy a house. When you buy a house, it doesn't depreciate by 25%. So, and that's where the cycle that we're in is that it depreciates in value. So, like for me, I'm paying off my current car, which I've had since I was a first officer at Envoy, in July. It's a great car. It could probably keep going. It only has like 40,000 miles on it, but the problem is the value keeps going down. So as soon as I pay it off, in order to get a good deal on my truck that I want to get, I need to get that in and trade it in while it's still running, and I don't have to sell it for scrap. It's not going to fall apart. It's a good car, but while the miles are low, while the value is high, especially in this market where inflation is playing a role in the trade-in value. But that's just what we do. We're in that cycle. It's like, that's the problem. I feel like with expensive cars like this is now you get into a cycle of buying $100,000 cars, $100,000 cars. That $100,000 could be going towards a down payment on a house, which we both know is a better investment and doesn't depreciate. You know what I mean? So anyways, I digress. I'm not, like I said, not a huge fan. I used to be a huge fan of Tesla. I like the technology and where they're going with it, but I feel like they're taking advantage of people liking Teslas and the name and exploiting that to their benefit and
Yes, and
getting the profit of it. So,
it's
uh,
kind of the thing of like, oh, well, I got a Tesla. Like
yeah,
it becoming like a status symbol. I was like, listen, not for nothing. If you want to impress me, I want to hear someone say, "Ooh, I got a McLaren." you
yeah,
know,
which we'll go into another. That's another thing. Supercars are cool, but I don't know why you would ever own one. But anyways, but
That's
our
okay.
kind of backtracking here, our moderator Lando Autopilot is watching, and he put in our Discord, and this is why I love our mods, the timeline of the airlines, because I mentioned that in the aviation news. So Delta is technically the first, March 2nd, 1925. United was April 6th, 1926. And American Airlines was April 15th, 1926. And Southwest was March 9th, 1967. I was right. Post deregulation.
There
Um,
you go.
but he also mentioned that Delta was a dust cropper or a crop duster company. Lando said United was the first commercial flight service, though. So
Oh,
even though so American was the last, United was the first one to commercially carry mail and people in
okay.
1920,
Now you
1926.
see, I learned something because I initially thought Delta was also airmail contractor
No, I
early
knew
in
that.
their
I didn't know
development.
they were crop dusting, but no, Delta started off as a very small. You know why Delta symbol was, or why it was Delta, right?
I do not.
Because their first service was a triangle. They did three cities, and
Oh, really?
the physics name for a triangle is delta. So
Yes.
delta stands for change. So that's what it was. That's why for the longest time it was that like chevron, is because of the 3 points the three cities that it served.
Believe it or not, in high school, I wound up with a 92 in physics at the end of the year. I was pretty good in it.
What happened to the last 8%?
Probably senior cut day.
Got him.
I
Got him.
did participate in senior cut day, except
I
mine
did
might
not.
have been more than a day. We're not discussing that.
I did not. I showed up because all my teachers were given exams and I could not sacrifice my GPA for that. So I was the only one in class, but the exams were like write your name on a piece of paper and I got 100. So I mean it helped towards my 4.3 GPA that I eventually got graduating from high school. But I digress.
Excuse
But
me.
anyways, so with that, we're going to transition over to our favorite segment of all time, jargon in a jiffy. So for those of you that are new or maybe forgot, because sometimes I forgot as well, jargon in a jiffy is basically Tommy and I take a word from our industry, so from the aviation industry or from Tommy's work experience, and we use it in a sentence, and the other host has to try and guess what it means. The point of this game is to introduce you to the lingo and jargon and terms that we use in our industry. So if you hear them, throughout your career and in the future, they're not as intimidating. So, Tommy, did you want to go first, or did you want me to go first?
No, please. You have the floor.
Okay. So my it's a acronym, stands for RNP. RNP. So while we're doing an approach we'll call it a R&P approach, we have to monitor the R&P to make sure it meets performance requirements. Sure, that
Radio
was hard to
navigation procedure.
no.
It sounds good
No,
though. Uh,
it's not even close. Has nothing to do with radio. That was hard to not give it away in the sentence.
yeah, it was because you know what? When you and I have done shared flight deck, we've done RNP approaches,
That is correct.
and
But the
I
question
know you
is,
said it, and for the
but the
life of me, I
question
can't remember
is,
what it was.
did you pay attention to what I was explaining to
I
you?
did, and I actually took notes that I now can't find. They're
How
here.
convenient.
Uh,
So what type of approach was it associated with? Do you remember?
were we coming into Princess Juliana?
Oh, I'm not
Dude.
talking about specific to the airport because everybody has most airports have RMP approaches. So was it an ILS? Because there's two types of approaches, right?
Yeah,
There's precision and non-precision, right? Precision is ILSs, right?
ILS.
It's precision is designed. Oh man, I'm screwing up the future jargon in Jiffy, but precision means that it has lateral and vertical guidance, right? Non-precision means it just has lateral guidance. So that's your localizers, right? Your
Right.
localizer approaches, your VR approaches. What else? What other type of approaches can we do that aren't ILSs? You
Would you
do
believe
them
I'm-
all the time.
I do, and I'm drawing a complete blank, and I do not know why.
What
'Cause I
What is
actually-
Apple Maps?
I'm sorry.
What is Apple Maps? What is Google Maps? What do we call that?
GPS approaches.
Okay.
So-
So we were doing GPS RNP approaches, RNAV approaches, right?
Yeah,
Okay. So RNP, man, I am just handing it to. I'm trying
you
to.
are, and you know what? You know what the pathetic part is? I don't know why, but I feel like a dull blade right now because I should know this.
Yeah,
you and I
because
have spoken
I've
to
explained
this.
it. I've explained it how to do
been-
what RNP stands for.
All right, man. I'm white flagging it for the sake of time.
Required navigation performance. RNPs. So RNP approaches are a special type of approach that allows us to do things like curved or RF legs around terrain and stuff like that, which normal GPS approaches can only be certified straight in. But it has a higher required navigational performance that we have to manually input into our flight computer to be able to fly these types of approaches. RNP could be like 0.11 nautical miles, which means it has to remain within 0.1 nautical miles of the course. And we do monitor it during our approaches. That's one of the things Prog page 4 on our FMS is to monitor that, because we have required navigation performance / actual navigation performance. And if actual navigation performance exceeds required navigation performance, then we have to do a go around. It's no longer a valid approach. So RNP stands for required navigation performance.
Touche, my friend. Touche.
Gotcha.
You
But
did.
in all fairness, it wasn't a blindside though, because we talked about it. That's why I picked it, because I know I've explained it. We've talked about it in the past doing RNP approaches.
Yes.
So
Because I do specifically remember too. I don't remember which shared flight deck it was, but I was like, "Hey, Bill, can you set us up for an RMP approach?" And you were like, "Yeah, take 2 minutes
easy
to do
peasy.
this."
Lemon squeezy. It's honestly one of the most complicated approaches that we do in the 737 because there's a lot of work to it. But once you get the routine down and do it a bunch of times, it's real easy. That's what training's for. So, all right, Tommy, what's your word?
Okay, so my word is on spots. It's actually a hyphenated word.
Okay.
So, Bill, that road is looking a little slick. Can you drop our on spots, please?
Are those the little legs that come out?
Those are actually called outriggers.
Okay, so that's not even close. Looks a little icy out there on spots. Is it a light? Is it a type of light?
No. Think of what do trucks do in icy road conditions?
It depends on the truck. If it's a Cybertruck, it's sliding off somewhere.
Yeah, it's aerodynamically planting
It's-
itself in a snowbank.
It's got a spoiler. On spots. What does a truck do when it's snowing? I mean, it's driving through the
specifically
snow.
ice. It is, but safety wise, what do larger trucks do during icy road conditions? You've seen them. You probably seen them within the last week.
Oh, is plows? Is it like a plow?
All right, keep coming. What other safety equipment
Um,
does a plow carry on it?
I
And
don't know.
they make an
I've never driven
ungodly
a plow.
noise. And if you're not
I
careful, sometimes they break and fly through your windshield.
I have no idea.
Think
There's a
about the
plow.
tires.
Is it chains?
It's chains, but a different type of
Snow
chains.
tires?
So
I have no idea. You got to understand. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, for 18
yeah,
years
not
of my
many
life.
vehicles had on spots where you grew up.
No, I have. So snow thing. I'm still learning how I can drive in the snow, but I'm still learning about wintry weather and stuff. So I give up. I have no idea.
Well, you were correct with the chains. Here's the difference
Okay.
between regular tire chains and on spots.
Okay.
On the rear wheels of most ambulances. Now, believe it or not, the ones in El Paso, Dallas, and all that, they're not an option. They're a mandatory safety equipment. The only difference is they stay tucked up. They don't
Okay.
turn them on. Usually in the middle is our light console and all of our light
Yeah.
controls, and you'll see a flip switch for on spot. What happens
Okay.
is a server drops down and will actually drop chains in front of the rear wheels and will drag through ice and start breaking up ice as the rear wheels are following it.
Interesting. I did not know that was a thing.
Oh,
100%
yeah,
did not know
that's
that was
been
a
a
thing.
thing. Oh,
No wonder roads suck in winter weather areas.
yeah, it's not the
They
plows
got
that tear them up,
chains
it's trucks that have on spots.
they
Um,
rip up the roads. That's
oh
what,
yeah,
that makes so much
yeah.
sense now.
The
I had no idea that was
they
a
became a
thing.
thing. The first test models came out somewhere in the earlier '90s,
Oh my
and
god, yeah. I had no that. And ladies and gentlemen, that is why we do jargon and Jiffy. 100% why we do it, because Tommy learned something new, even though he should have already known it.
true
And
story.
then, but on spot, like I didn't know that was a thing. I
Mhm.
knew what snow tires were. I didn't realize that's how they. Interesting, interesting. I could see where it might break your windows because it'll spin up and like
Oh yeah,
smack the
yeah.
side of
They're
the car.
with everything else, technology improved, so the
Yeah.
way they are developed and installed and all that stuff have improved over the years. But yeah, we've heard horror stories of one chain, and they're not short. Like the chains are almost a foot long that drop out of the server unit.
A foot long.
Oh yeah, yep.
So how's that driving though? I feel like that'd be so annoying
You
constantly
feel nothing
driving on chains.
in a diesel truck. You feel
Yeah.
nothing. In a gas truck, you get a little bit of a stutter, but nothing that if you're in a gas truck in
Yeah.
ice conditions and you're going that fast, you should probably rethink life choices at that moment.
Okay, I was say because physics wise, in my brain it's not working. But anyways, I digress. But good, man. That was a good jargon and GIF. We
Yeah,
stumped each
you know
other.
what? That was a very good jargon in the jiffy.
That was good. All
I'm
right.
impressed
Well,
with both of us.
that was good. That was really good. I definitely learned something new. Which, like I said, that's the whole point of jargon and Jiffy. But now moving on to our segment Career Corner, where Tommy and I will talk about how to get from point A to point B in our careers. So you're kind of towards, I don't want to say the tail end, but mid to tail end of our career explanation. So if you're interested in either being a professional pilot or an airline pilot, or if you're interested in being a certified EMT or a medical professional, you got to go all the way back to episode 1. This is episode 14. Go all the way back to episode 1. And around this time, usually is around the 50-minute mark in the show, is when we have Career Corner. And we talk about each episode is a stepping block to becoming the ultimate goal or ultimate epitome, I guess, or what's the word? Not apogee. The whatever. The high end of the career where we
Pinnacle.
finally, pinnacle. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't say that.
Always
Perigee,
here for you, brother.
apogee. Oh my god. It's a bad day when I start slipping with words. So, but anyways, so that's what we're talking about today. But up first, Tommy's going to be talking about week number 11?
12.
12. I'm Lucy.
Week 12.
Slipping. I am slipping. So week 12, which is cardiology. So Tommy, take it away.
Thanks, Bill. And you're not slipping. You just have a lot going on. Believe me, I understand that. So week 12, we come in and we're going to go a little bit more in depth for week 13 because this is not a small module, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about cardiology. Cardiology is a vast but intricate subject. The first week, we're going to go over the anatomy, physiology, what the heart does, what it doesn't do, what you don't want it to do, and what you hope it will do. Uh, it can be very, very fickle. The heart of, for those of you who are older car fans and remember the days of the 4-barrel carburetor, that's what the heart is. It takes blood in, it pushes blood out. It's a lot more in depth than that. And as we go on through the training, you'll figure out why. Also, the heart has a very, very interesting twist to it. As everyone knows, the human body has veins and arteries. Well, arteries carry blood away from the heart, veins carry blood back to the heart, except when it comes to the heart and lungs. That's reversed. So the pulmonary veins bring blood to the lungs, the pulmonary arteries bring it back to the heart. And believe it or not, for those of you who are in EMT school and watching, that is a test question. Just throwing that out there. But I digress. And what we're going to do is we will really, really get into the nitty gritty. Why heart attacks happen, how they happen, where they happen. Um, you will also get a little bit of a history lesson. The one and sole reason back in the 50s and early, lasting to the mid 60s, the reason why paramedics were born, and it's not just solely EMTs, the reason why paramedics were born and put on was solely for pre-hospital cardiac care. That was their one and only job function back in the day when they first came up with paramedics. So the 60s and 70s with Johnny and Roy, where they saved everybody's life in like an hour that had any sort of heart problem, that was really only their primary concern. And then later on, it's spooled to what paramedics do today. But it is, I'm going to be honest, it is a difficult subject to grasp because it's a lot of slides. It's a lot of video. We'll show you what a cardiac catheterization looks like, even though I watched my own on the computer monitor, which is really freaky but cool at the same time. Uh, and we're just going to delve into this as deep as we can. What medications are we giving? What do they do? You know, what happens? What's the and all the different symptoms that the heart can bring on, and there are hundreds. There literally are hundreds. So it's time to be adults. It's if you're one of those students who kind of peruses the chapters instead of actually reading the chapters, cardiology is not the module you want to be doing that on because you will definitely have an issue passing. And this is a big chunk. We actually give a unit exam specifically on cardiology, and this may bump you out of class if your average is already. We don't intentionally go doing that, but we're getting to the point in the class around week 12, week 13, week 14, where the EMT candidates actually start to realize that at some given point, they're going to be responsible for someone's life and they're expected to actually do things that will, in a positive way, take care of someone and possibly save their life. And cardiology is kind of like your first stroke of reality, if you will, because at this point on in your clinicals, which we haven't mentioned, but they're still ongoing, whether you're on the truck with a seasoned crew or you're in the emergency room, chances are you have already witnessed someone having some sort of cardiac event. And that's what we need you to be prepared for. And we need you actually to start implying critical thinking so you can anticipate what's coming up. So with that, coming towards the end of week 12 is going to kind of be a cliffhanger. After we're done with anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology of the medications, and all that good stuff, then we'll start getting into the different coronary conditions in the beginning of week 13. So here we are, Bill. The starts of a
I
huge, huge
was ready for you that
subject
time.
matter.
I was ready for
You
the
are,
transition.
you were right there,
I
buddy.
was ready. So Tommy likes to just abruptly change, and that's why last time I was not ready. I do the slow tapered, like obviously winding down to going, and so now we're going to switch over to Tommy. So Tommy's ready. And Tommy's just like, Bill?
I do have to work on that.
It's like,
And
God.
you would figure, like, with all the episodes that we've done together, I would have some sort of expertise. But like I said, and I apologize to everyone today, I feel like a dull blade. I'm like that
Dude,
one butter knife
I
that's in
couldn't.
the bottom of the drawer that everyone forgets about. That's how I'm feeling this morning.
I'm the rusty spoon at the very back, the one that still had a little bit of milk on it. You know, that's me because I couldn't get the word pinnacle earlier. Anyways, but yeah. So if the earlier when you saw me startled, because I didn't think Tommy was done. I thought Tommy was still going. And
I will say
I
though, the
usually
facial expression was priceless.
well, because the thing is I edit our podcast, so I know Tommy's rhythm, right? So I thought I thought I was getting better at timing when he was finishing up, but like I said, it's just like Bill, and it's like, oh god, deer in headlights. I wasn't ready with all the different things because on my side, I'm the one doing the ticker tapes and all that sort of stuff. So I'm trying to time everything to make it look professional. But
well,
that one I got. That one I was ready.
I can't let it become mundane, man. You just
oh, you could. It'd be great if you could. 100% would make my life a little bit easier if I wasn't.
Well, you know what? I will definitely work on.
Yep, or I could do that. I'm just kidding.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when Bill and I are a little bit tired, or we have an overload of adulting.
It's been a long week.
It has been.
I've only had 3 days off, and like last night, I was up at midnight to check us in for the cruise because I was excited. But fun fact, cruise check-in didn't open until like 12:30. So I was up until 12:30 last night. So, oh my god, yeah, it's been a long week. But nonetheless, yeah, this is Tommy and I just being humorous back and forth. But anyways, with that being said, I will do a quick takeover here, and we're going to be talking about airline trading. So, if you remember, the past last week we talked about the maneuvers phase. So that's where everything's on fire, you're on fire, airplane's upside down, one engine's working, there's a mountain in front of you, plus wind shear, upset. So basically, it's all the emergency procedures, all the things that you don't normally see out on the line. We talked about last week. And as everything, each phase ends with a evaluation of some sort, and last week was the MV, or maneuvers validation. So this week is technically the second to last phase before you're a line qualified airline pilot. This week we're talking about the last phase before your type rating, which is called LOFT, or line oriented flight training. So this wasn't always the deal. This is more recent. Came with AQP, which is Advanced Qualification Performance, which is just a better way to train pilots. In this phase, you're learning how to be an airline pilot in kind of the real world. So they try to simulate point A to point A or point B flights with regular day-to-day operations, so you're not completely blindsided when you go to the line in the next phase. We call the line, which is out actually flying, not in training. So that is, but there's always like small, like little things. So stuff that you can see on the line. For example, you take off and you get a pack light. Okay, so run the checklist. What do you do? Do you rate this up now? Do you divert? Blah, blah. So you work through normal day-to-day scenarios to go from point A to point B, which is good news because, once again, you don't get blindsided when you go to the line. But the important part is you're being tested on your ability to be a human being and how well you work with everybody else, and just in a crew environment, which is way more comfortable than everything's on fire, you're on fire, airplane's upside down, wind shear, terrain, and your left engine doesn't work. Oh, not to mention, they just recently did this to us in our last training scenario. Full FAA crosswind, like 25 knot gusts while single engine in San Francisco. So that's fun. But that's my point. It's a little more relaxed. But the good news is the end evaluation of this is what's called your QLOE, or line-oriented evaluation. All that is it's going to be a flight from point A to point B. You're usually paired with a captain or a seat support who is a instructor who's playing a captain. You're playing your role as a first officer in the real world. And you're going to go from point A to point B. Most likely something will happen in between, something manageable. It won't be like the MV stage. I want to say my first one, I can't remember with Envoy. I want to say it was something that was like a pack light, which we were up at 31,000, or we were above 31,000 feet. And if I remember correctly on the CRJ, we just had to come back down to below flight level 310 and write it up when we get there. So it's 2 legs: pilot monitoring, pilot flying. So working the radios and doing non-flying stuff, and then flying. Another one is like flap asymmetry. So you go to put down your flaps and there's a flap asymmetry. Okay, we'll break off the approach and go handle it set up for a either flap handle disagree or a flap asymmetry or no flap landing depending on the scenario. Then once you successfully completed that, that's the one that the FAA is sitting in on and examining you on. Then you get your type rating, which is awesome. So at that point, once you complete your LOE, you're now a type rated pilot. So for example, at the end of my Boeing 737 training, I did my loft or my LOE, and I got my type rating as a 737 pilot. But training's not over yet. So it's a huge deal. It means you are stepping outside of what I call the schoolhouse or the training center, and then you are moving on to flying the actual airplane. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about what's called IOE, or Initial Operating Experience, where your first time flying a jet or transport category aircraft will be with a instructor pilot and people in the back. I know it's wild to think about that, but your first flight in an airliner will be with real passengers behind you with a check pilot or an instructor pilot. But that is what we're going to be talking about next week. But that will segue us nicely into our next topic here. Did I get you?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Tommy. Yep. So now this could become an evil game where Tommy and I are just going to try to screw each other. But here's the thing. I have the power. I'm the one producing all the things. So
yes.
Don't
And
get
we
too
do have to
froggy with
maintain
me.
some level of professionality.
We do. Yeah, we do. Because
we
that's
could
what
act like
this
kids
show's
when
based
we're on
on.
Modern Warfare.
That's true. Okay. But now we're going to move over to our next segment, which is the viewer Q&A. So this is, if you all have a question, if you have something you want us to talk about on the show, definitely go join our 3 Green Simulations Discord. It's free to join, free to use, never going to be charging a subscription because we don't believe in that. And that's also the most direct way to join us or get direct access to Tommy and I to ask questions and interact with us. But there is a section and category for the 3 Green Simulations group. You can go down and add questions for us to answer, or if you want us to discuss a specific topic, that's the place to post it, because then we can use that as one of our discussion topics as well. Also, another place you can join us is at our Twitter, which is at Torque and Thrust. The QR code's on the screen. It's at Torque, the letter N, Thrust, TS, Torque in Thrust TS for Talk Show. And you can also post questions there. We try to post daily there as well. On my side, I don't have any questions. Tommy, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions this week.
Okay, and this is where we just say hello to everybody because we know people are jumping in. And so like Curtis Clapp just joined
Hello.
in TikTok Live. So we can see you guys joining. We know you're there. We're not ignoring you. It's just this is the segment where we get to acknowledge our wonderful viewers and listeners. So
yes.
Now we get to move on, since we don't have any questions. We get to move on to the meat and potatoes of this podcast, which is the weekly discussion topic. So if you notice, our titles are mainly based off of this. So each title has to do with the discussion topic of the week. Last week is Eye in the Sky. We talked about drones or unmanned aerial systems and the idea of privacy and what is fact and myth basically behind drones and privacy. Tommy and I talked about that, talked about case law and other discussions. So if that's something that you're interested, go check out episode number 13. So each episode is named specifically for the discussion topic. So if you're scrolling through on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or iHeartRadio, and you're like, oh, this is about Christmas sweaters or Christmas traditions, let's do that one. Or, hey, we're talking about, I'm trying to remember one of the other ones we did. Nightmare Before Christmas. Is it a Christmas movie or is it a Halloween movie? Right? And by the way, I won that argument. I won that argument because, was it PC Gamer on Twitter posted something about a Christmas movie and it was Nightmare Before Christmas.
It was PC Gamer.
It was
on
PC
their
Gamer,
Twitter
and
account. Yep.
And
or
I immediately
or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah, and I immediately shared it to everybody. I was like, I was right. PC Gamer backed me. But anyways, so definitely that's what the talk show is mainly about, is these discussion topics. Now, this week is relative to what we were talking about in the news with aviation. We're talking about antitrust laws, which is basically an anti-competitive laws. basically those are laws in place to present a monopolization of one company over a certain market, because in the United States we're capitalists, so part of being capitalist is being able to compete with big businesses. So antitrust laws are in effect to protect small businesses from other people taking over entire industries. But the discussion topic that we're going to talk about is antitrust laws. Are they good, Tommy, or are they just protecting big business?
I
So
think initially, I remember one of
can I, real quick though, can I go into the history real quick of where this started
actually, yeah, yeah, because that
to
gives
do
me a
like a
better time
baseline?
to put a good
Yep.
thought together.
All right. And I'll fight people over this. Greatest president of all time, Teddy Roosevelt. Back in the early 1900s, 1904.
You will
The
not be
man's a
fighting
legend.
people alone with that one. I agree with you.
Teddy Roosevelt was an amazing president, right? The square deal, right?
Mhm.
If you guys don't know now, I am a history buff, nerd, geek, whatever you want to call it. I like history. The square deal, right, was a big one that it was kind of his campaign. The three C's. So control, right? Consumer protection and conservation. Control of corporations, he was cracking down on big business, right? Which is the anti-monopoly, antitrust.
Mhm.
Consumer protection, it was important that the consumers had rights with big business. Otherwise, they were just going to get railroaded by big business, right? And the
Indeed.
final one is conservation. The reason that we have national parks and proper preservation of certain areas of the United States is because of Teddy Roosevelt and the Square Deal. That he's the one that started that whole thing. Okay. But what we're focusing on is the first two of the three C's, which is control of corporations and consumer protection. So basically, the discussion is the way it's evolved in nowadays. Are we actually controlling corporations? Are we protecting, or is it more so protecting the interest of the competitors in the market? Or are we trying to protect consumers with antitrust, anti-competitive laws? So, all right. That's the basis of the discussion. Tommy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much because, man, the thoughts are flying. That hamster
Yep.
is running around the wheel at 100 miles an hour. I agree
Mine's
with
falling
you
off,
about
but we'll get to that.
I agree with you about Teddy Roosevelt.
Hmm.
And one of the things too, now I know you do, but just to back up a little bit of history, Rockefeller was actually the first person that had to go up against the United States government back during Roosevelt's
Yes.
presidency with Standard Oil, was the first person to,
Yep.
with the antitrust laws that had come into
Antitrust
effect.
and because Rockefeller was a giant with oil and with
And the
railroads.
railroad. Yep. And that was
Railroad
all
is
to,
was the primary target during this start because railroads were owning everything.
oh yes. Oh yes. And I believe Rockefeller was in his mid 60s, early, maybe even his early 70s at that point, and had already stepped down
Hmm.
from Standard, but he was still running it. We all know how this goes. We're not going to pull punches here. But um I think back then they were more towards protecting the consumer. Because little known fact about Teddy Roosevelt, for those of you who would like to learn, Teddy Roosevelt hails from upstate New York. He
Hmm.
was also the New York City police commissioner when it first became NYPD. And to this day, 2024, the shield that the police commissioner in New York carries was designed by Teddy Roosevelt. That's why his picture is
Nice.
on the wall. But he was very much about the people because back in his day, you actually had to go out, shake people's hands, get to know people. That's the only way you were able to get going in your political career. So he very
Hmm.
much was. Nowadays, I think that has over the years, it's morphed into, I think it protects the bigger companies. Consumers have taken more of a back seat. It just
I
protects some companies from getting
I
too big in the
but
competition field.
and I agree. And here's the part that I don't agree with, right? And I do agree with you. The part that I think is a little sketch, right? It's a little sus. That's what the kids are saying nowadays.
No,
Is that this type of proceeding isn't done in a judicial setting. There's
no.
very little objectivity associated with it. A lot of it is it's by the government, right? So, for example, just bring up more history. In 1906, the Hepburn Act was signed
Mhm.
away, and basically, like you're talking about, the railroads. Basically, it prevented the railroads from only transporting goods that favored their financial interest. So they could physically hurt the competition by not transporting those goods, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but back then it was right. I feel like it was trying to get everybody's foot in, because the American dream is the capitalist dream. You can be anything you want, right? But if there's big Rockefeller taking up more than 80% of the industry, then you have nowhere to go. It's really hard to get out from underneath that. But that was back over 100 years ago, 120 years ago, as a matter of fact, or right around there. But I think you're right. The problem is now is there's lobbyists, right? Which in their own right, they're good at what they do. But the problem is when you're lobbying and you have political influence as part of something that should be as objective as competitive, not competitive, then who's stopping someone to be like, hey, I'll give you an extra $1 million a year towards your presidential campaign, but you got to block this merger with JetBlue and Spirit, right?
Exactly.
Now, granted, that was a DOJ injunction, so a federal judge did rule it, because eventually those mergers do have, but Congress has the ability to approve stuff like that too, if I'm not mistaken. So you have outside forces that has nothing to do with consumerism, with you, me, average Joe Schmo, right? Or average Sally, protecting those interests. But is it really the interest, right? Because also, if you want to think about it, a lot of people argue that antitrust laws are to protect small business, right? I'm all about small business. If I can support local small businesses, I will. Like, for example,
100%.
weird example, our mattress is from a local mattress store, right? We go to local restaurants if we can. I try to support small business. But here's the thing. You think those small businesses have enough money to lobby Congress to block the larger companies from taking over an industry?
No, not even close.
No.
Not even a drop in the ocean worth.
No. So the argument that antitrust is to protect like small businesses is also wrong, because it's not really, because it's a government entity, which, as we've seen in the past like decade now with politics, is swayed by money, greed, and people who don't really represent a majority of the population. I am now stepping down from my soapbox for a second. It's about politics, but those people are the ones that are deciding what trusts and what is monopoly and what moves through and not, which is something as simple as, hey, we're going to line your pockets a little bit more for your next election. Let this one go through. You know what I mean? And there's no hard, like, they can't control more than 80%. Because even if it is, hey, you can't control more than 80% of this market. 80%, how do you quantify that? Is that 80% of shipping? Is that 80% of income? Is that 80% of clientele, like customer base? You know what I mean? There's no hard number to be like, nope, can't do it. A perfect example is the JetBlue Spirit transaction. I thought that was a slam dunk. I thought that was reasonable, because you look at the big four and they control 80% of the market. As the federal government, right, to prevent, now granted, for me, it would be good for my airline to be able to charge whatever they want, right? Because it means money in my pocket, means money for the airline. But from a business standpoint, I want all the airlines to be able to compete with the big four. So if that merger, which Spirit is obviously in a bad position financially, I would have let that go through, because it's like, all right, now we have a fifth contender, the fifth biggest airline in the United States. Now everybody's competing for rates, which benefits the small people, the traveler, because now they have to start undercutting each other's prices. Now, granted, it's not great for the airlines because they're not making as much money, but in terms of this whole antitrust, we're protecting the small person, the consumer protection, that would help. But my question is, why is the DOJ stepping in? That's still weird. Why the DOJ is stepping in to block this merger. But it just, for me, it doesn't make sense in terms of antitrust, because it's not like they'd be the number one airline. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In low-cost carrier, you still have Frontier, you still have Allegiant, and technically Southwest is a low cost, but they're kind of on the high end of low cost.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I mean? So I think in its infancy, when my boy Teddy Roosevelt initially started the Square deal with consumer protection and control of companies, it was intended correctly. Because back then, people did what they said. There was, politics was limited. It was, people had diction,
integrity.
People had passion. There was integrity. The greed wasn't nearly what it was. So I think it was intended correctly to help limit over certain businesses from taking over all the monopoly and not allowing others to step up, and as well as consumer protection too is given rights to the consumer. But I think we've lost sight of that currently. Because there's politics involved, which there shouldn't be politics in politics. I know that sounds silly, but there's a lot of backroom meetings. Like, was it Hamilton? I want to be in the room where it happens. The room.
Hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that we don't see. We don't know why this merger didn't go through. Like I said, DOJ. That's weird, but to me, it made sense. It would put another player in this, country club, of the airlines, the big four, that can't be touched right now. Now, granted, I'm one of the big four, right? I'm working for one of the big four, so it's good for me. But I'm just, it doesn't make sense why that was blocked. And claiming antitrust and anti-competitive, to me, is BS. I'm sorry, Judge Young, the federal judge that that blocked the merger. I just don't know. I honestly have no idea why they did it.
No, and it is kind of weird. Like when I was listening to you when you were presenting, the DOJ, really?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't know
'cause I know
why.
they got other things to do.
Yeah, there's yeah exactly.
They're busy.
There's other things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm hoping we get some sort of report on that in the future because I'll be honest with you. I remember when I first heard about the JetBlue Spirit deal, and then I mean it hit the um, news pipeline like a gangbuster, and then after a while, poof,
Well, that's
it's
because
like
we
it
were
just went
waiting.
away.
It's because we were waiting to see if they will. Because every merger has to be approved by the U.S. federal government,
Oh,
whether it
sure.
was American and America West. So we were just waiting. But I honestly didn't think it was. I didn't think it was going to be an issue, to be completely honest. And I think the judge was arguing maybe the consumer protection side of things, because they specifically said the judge was worried about the price point going up for tickets. But here's the deal, though. I don't think. I don't think that's a valid argument, though, because if anything, it would drive down the prices of the other competitors.
Well,
Because
that's
if you
just
show
it.
up, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
if you show up like with JetBlue and Spirit, now you're big enough to compete structure wise and offer routes and stuff as the other big four, but you maintain your price point, right? A comfortable profit margin, operating margin, profit margin, etc. for shareholders. But don't go shooting through the roof to match like Delta, who is probably one of the most expensive, but most expensive in terms of to produce the product, the cost of producing the product. Um, but keep it at the price point, but offer similar frequency or product. It's always about price, product, and promotion. So lower the price, right? Keep the price the same. Um, but match Delta's product, right? Frequencies, destinations. It'll force the bigger airlines to drop the prices.
right.
So
Because what fuels like competition in and of
it's and
itself
that's
in the long term will fuel your profits.
and that's the thing that doesn't make sense. The judge cited anti-competitive and the price point going up. That was his two main arguments as to why they blocked the merger. But by blocking the merger, they make JetBlue less competitive and allow the big four to continue to control the airline rates. And big four, low cost carrier Southwest, is setting the price point for low cost carriers. That's what JetBlue, that is what, even though it's more of a hybrid, that is what Allegiant, that is what Frontier and Avelo and all those people, that's what they're competing with, is Southwest. So why not give them, the whole point is to prevent a monopoly of the low cost carrier market, which one of the big four is Southwest. Now, they may not control all of it because obviously, based off size of the airline, you can't service every destination out there. So there's little niche markets that they can jump into. But by blocking them, it's kind of counterintuitive. It's counter to what the whole antitrust thing is, because it's allowing a low cost carrier to continue to dominate the market as part of one of the big four because of its history. But it's not. But you're not allowing a smaller company the ability to compete and also drive prices down from the big four to make it more affordable for the consumer or the American traveler.
Right. Because at the end of the day and the end of any business's fiscal quarter, it is
Hmm.
without the consumer, you do not have a business.
No, you don't. But there's also a need, though. And
Yeah,
that's the problem is air travel is so efficient. If I told you it's gonna because this is what Amtrak does right now, it's gonna cost you twice as much, takes 4 times as long to get to where you're going, and there's definitely gonna be delays because Amtrak is never on time. Or you could pay half the price, get there in half the time, and maybe worry about some delays. So
right.
there's
And get
always
a
and
full
that's and
view out the window.
yeah, and so there's always a need. There's always a need for air travel, which is good for me as an airline pilot. But I just it doesn't for me. The blocking of the injunction is, or the I'm sorry, the blocking of the merger by this federal judge to me makes no sense.
I
Now it
just
is a federal judge, so you would argue that there is objectivity because they're a judge, but that doesn't mean they can't be swayed. You know what I mean? Like legally they can't take a bribe, right? But it also there might be other motivations to block said um,
it
merger.
might be. I'm not going to say a bribe, but it might have just been the judge's perception
Hmm.
of the information he was provided.
Correct. Yeah, it's an
You know,
opinionated, even though
someone
it's
just might have
objective.
wrote up the proposal a lot better than someone else. It could very well be that simple. I doubt it,
Yeah.
but it could be very well that simple.
Yeah, it could be misinterpreted. Also, I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, even judges. Maybe Judge Young saw something that we didn't, something foreseen. Um, I don't know. It's just, and also by doing this, Judge Young also may have driven the nail in the coffin for Spirit because now there's articles out there on Simple Flying 2 that are talking about bankruptcy or the fact that we may see Spirit wither away because of their financials, possibly, unless another airline comes in and buys them. And
Well,
since JetBlue was blocked from Spirit, JetBlue now has the option of taking over Frontier if they want to, or try to acquire Frontier. And see, that would be weird to me if they try to acquire Frontier and the judge is like, and the DOJ is like, yep, that works. It'd be like,
yeah.
wait, hold on.
Well, that just
How?
opens the door also to a different market because at my local, starting this year, we're having nonstop service with Breeze Airlines coming in.
Oh, Breeze. I forgot about Breeze. Yeah.
You
Hmm.
know, and I don't really know the history on Breeze. I,
It's a JetBlue
I
startup, JetBlue's parent company.
yeah, I mean, so what happens to them? You
Well,
know,
they're a
what
separate
happens
entity.
to other
They're yeah. So, well, Breeze. See, remember airlines inside of airlines? Do you remember TED Airlines for United and
sure do.
United Air Shuttle? So,
Hmm.
historically speaking, airlines within low cost carriers inside of major airlines doesn't work out too well. But what's happening and what we're seeing with Breeze and JetBlue, so JetBlue started off as a low cost carrier, right? What we're seeing is
Hmm.
JetBlue growing into what we call a hybrid carrier, which is a mix between no frills and full service carriers like the Big Four. Well, I not like the Big Four, the Big Four except for Southwest, right, where it's full service. It's not like Spirit where you're nickel and diamond for everything, right? So what we're seeing is that the model is changing, but JetBlue had a huge market in the low cost carrier, and that's where Breeze comes from. Because Breeze, because it's a separate entity, can stay in that low cost carrier market, still feeding money and profit into the mother company, which is JetBlue, while JetBlue goes on to compete as a full service air carrier. I
Try
mean, it's
getting
ingenious. Yeah, it's basically divide and conquer is what they're doing. They're splitting up. It's the same parent company, but they're maintaining service and that revenue income from that demographic that serves the low cost carrier market, while being able to move on and compete with the big four for the full service stuff.
and
So
hopefully maybe at some point, 40 years down the line, have climbed that legacy ladder.
yeah, and maybe that's why they also the judge said no to that is knowing that Breeze exists. Because if you pull out Spirit, which is one of the biggest competitors in that little market for or in that market for low cost carrier, um, you pull them out and add them to JetBlue's fleet, but then you still got Breeze playing the game. Then JetBlue then is still competing in that low cost carrier market. So, like I said, there's a reason why the judge did it, but it seems counterintuitive to not allow a airline who is making a smart decision. In my opinion, I think JetBlue and Spirit. I think although the pilots are a little worried about the merger because, like I said, mergers suck for everybody. You can ask anybody. Um, it's in their best interest, and it allows them to compete with the big four. And
Hmm.
so to block it saying it's for anti-competition laws and antitrust laws doesn't make any sense to me, because they're allowing the big four to continue to monopolize 80% of the market, and also not allowing a smaller competitor the opportunity to compete in what is a capitalist market. And it has been since the deregulation in the 1950s. That was the whole point, because in the 1950s and beyond, before deregulation, the FAA and the government, the Civil Aviation Organization, set the prices because it was all government run because of airmail and stuff like that. So the airlines had no ability to set their own prices, and they weren't making any money. So that's why they deregulated in the 1950s, and the government said, "All right, you guys can set your own rates, have at it." And that's where the capitalism comes from, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's a developing, once again developing. We'll keep you all updated, but to be completely honest, I don't understand why the judge did it, and that's my personal opinion.
Neither do I, but I'm very, very interested to see what the legal department at JetBlue is going to come up with, because they're working
Well,
on that already.
but the thing is, you can't counteract a
No, but it doesn't mean you
federal
can't come up
judge
with
writ.
an entire new deal.
Well, the thing is that merger's blocked, so that took what, like 6 months,
Yep.
6 to 8 months to do. So, and like I said, I don't know if there was any time limit on coming back, because the judge didn't say you can't try again, but I think
He didn't
by
exactly
this
say you
is,
could neither.
well, I think this sets a precedent though, because they said this merger's not going to happen. So now it's up to JetBlue to be like, all right, who else needs this acquisition, which is primarily Airbus companies.
Yes.
So you got Frontier. I don't think Allegiant has Boeing 737 Max 7s on order. So I don't know if they want to try to snag them up before that happens. But I'd say the next thing is Frontier, because Frontier and Spirit were doing the same thing. But the problem is Spirit was the one in financial trouble, if I remember correctly, and Frontier was trying to help with the merger with Spirit. Or I got to look at the financials, the quarterly reports for Frontier, because who knows? They both might have been struggling with, hey, let's struggle together and figure this out together, and that would better, versus someone coming in and saving, because there's mergers are all over the place. It could be two companies that are struggling that need to merge to survive. It could be one successful company coming in and saying, hey, you need our help, so let us save you. Or it could be the airline going to another airline going, hey, we're struggling, we need a merger to stay alive. There's a lot of different ways this can play. So it'll be interesting in the next year. It'll probably be another year or two to see what JetBlue ends up happening. But I personally, what's the saying that the kids are saying now on TikTok? Let them cook, right?
Mhm.
Let them cook.
Let 'em cook.
JetBlue compete. If both companies are able to consensually, it sounds weird, but consensually agree to the merger, right? Let them do it. Like they're stepping up to plate to compete with the big four giants: United, Delta, American, and Southwest. Let them do it. That is capitalism. That's the whole point that's the American dream, is being able to compete with the big dogs. So
Yeah.
let them do it. But nobody's going to be listening to this podcast. I'm pretty sure Judge Young isn't probably be listening to the podcast either.
Well, he
But
should be.
he should be. Go
He
tell
should
Judge. No, I'm
be.
kidding. He
Someone
should be
get me his
listening to the
number.
podcast. Yeah, he should be. But no, I let him compete, man. Like that's the American dream.
That's it. Let the
If
kids play,
JetBlue-
man. Let the kids
if
play.
if JetBlue wants to step up and offer a better product at a better price point to the American people, then that is their prerogative. So, but anyways, that was a good discussion. A lot of
Yeah, I
history,
actually really
a
enjoyed
lot
that
of
one.
antitrust. I came up with it relatively quick within the past week, because Tommy and I only had the first topic set for the month, and then all the crazy stuff with the move and all that stuff is happening. So it was like kind of lost
You
track
know
of
what?
everything.
In our own ways, like we have both had a whirlwind January. What, 3 weeks into it now? Yeah, 3 weeks into it.
Yes, it's been wild. Been
Yep.
very, very wild. So this was a great discussion, because we got to talk a little bit about history, which is the square deal and 3Cs. We got to talk about really our opinions on antitrust and how it's been morphed. And also I got to talk a little bit more about the JetBlue merger, because that's something I've been following for a little bit. So that concludes episode number 14 of the called Antitrust. We thank you all for joining us and hope you've enjoyed the talk show. If you want to stay up to date with the show and industry news, follow us on Twitter at Torque in Thrust Talk Show. And if you'd like to save the show for on-the-go entertainment, news, follow and turn on notifications for the talk show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and iHeartRadio. And feel free to follow Tommy and I on YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok, and Kick. We're under Captain Bill Official and Level Flight Simulations on Kick. It's under Torque and Thrust Talk Show. We will be live on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter next time on January 25th, so in a week, 2024 at 10 a.m. Central and 11 a.m. Eastern. So on behalf of the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, I am Bill.
I am Tommy.
And we will see you all next week.